We are on my agenda. We are live. This is Senate Finance, March 13th. And we are going to continue and possibly vote on last three bills, I think, that we need to get out of here because they came to us directly. So these are our votes today or not. The first one is S-220, and I know Senator Chittenden and Senator Beck. The bill as it came to us calls for a cap on school spending between 3 and 9%, just depending on what your current spending per pupil is. If you're a high spender, you're capped at 3%. If you're a lower spender, you're capped at, you can do the 9. And I know we had a lot of discussion about impacts on tuitioning schools and state tuition, private individual tuition. And I understand Senator Chittenden, you and Senator Beck have been working, and then we had a similar amendment which went on 282 yesterday. It's Senator Hardy's proposal. So I think this may be the easier bill to get through today. So Senator Chittenden, Beck, for the public,
Okay.
we got off the floor about 15-20 minutes ago, so the committee is eating lunch.
So I'll say a few things and then you see what I think John Gray should be able to present soon.
Okay.
It won't be a surprise to a couple pieces to what you had yesterday. It does lower the excess spending threshold. I'm proposing 112%, and we have numbers to look at with what that is. It also excludes all voter approved bonded debt. So regardless, it basically takes that data out, which is I think what you did, Senator Hardy. You'll also see that it includes an appeals process, because I am worried that if we put this in, and we should look at the numbers, at whatever number we pick, there is likely to be circumstances we're not necessarily anticipating, and some that are in that. I don't know if it's up on the page yet. Okay, so it's on the page now. And this has been honestly, I did not work on it in town meeting week at all. It really is a Tuesday morning, like, oh, we got to get something together. So that's where the chair said I should just start working on this, pulling some perspectives together, and being crossover week. I wish I had talked to everybody, but I figured this is how the conversation would build on everything we've already previously discussed. So those are the main contours, that this is a soft cap and not a hard cap, which is what I discovered as we dove into this topic, thanks to much of the commentary and advice from those that have been for years in Senate Finance than me. This is an allowable spending growth cap is something that has come up in years past, and it hasn't been employed and stated in law because it is problematic for a variety of reasons that we could belabor. But the excess spending threshold alternatively is something that is in law today, and using it as a lever to apply reasonable yet soft downward pressure and incentives to contain spending for those that, compared to the other peers and adjusted for inflation, are spending more than 112% of that adjusted amount. So I think Julia has some numbers to present. Are we waiting on John Gray to walk through the language?
We're gonna have to have John. Julia is booked in the house all day. I don't know, John, did we get any numbers from Julia?
We did. She
did?
said not to post them until
You said so. Okay.
Do you want me to post them?
Yeah. And John can walk us through it.
Did I miss anything? So we got it. Okay.
I think there may be somebody from Joint Fiscal watching us with the ability to text Julia, lest we get ourselves, but we are operating with one hand tied behind our back at this point.
So it is up on the webpage.
Okay. It is up on the webpage.
I just bumbled through an introduction.
Okay.
I understood about it.
Gave permission.
I
Okay.
mistakenly thought there's a different ordering of bills.
Okay. John,
I'm happy to come up.
yeah, you can take the hot seat whenever you're ready. Yeah.
While you're getting settled, John, I do support this language as is. It's a place where I think I definitely can support. I think it's good policy, partly because it's already existing. There's one question that, as I was talking in some emails with John this morning, that I certainly could raise in the discussion, which I'd be open to it. But maybe now that he's at the chair, I will raise that kerfuffle not a kerfuffle, just a policy option, after we walk through the language. Okay, that's at the end.
Okay.
So, afternoon, everyone. John Gray, Office of Legislative Counsel. I'm gonna screen share with you this proposed amendment to S220. I will just note for purposes of presentation, in the past, we've had, just draft proposal headers because I saw that there's a possible vote. I do have this in the form of a committee amendment, so we didn't have to keep editing all that stuff again, but this is just a proposal that happens to be in the form of a committee amendment. So it's going to look quite different from what you saw before. I think with Senator Chittenden has already explained that backs away from the cap itself and it's a proposal related to the excess spending threshold, which I will just note is the way that previous allowable growth proposals have worked. They've been actually amendments to the excess spending threshold. But this is relatively simple to explain, I think. So we start with the definition of education spending, which has particularly exclusions when we talk about the excess spending calculation. The one that you're going to be familiar with is what you see here on line 20 on the first page. For all bonds approved by voters prior to July 1, 2024, voter-approved bond payments toward principal and interest shall be excluded from education spending for the purposes of calculating excess spending. So that's the existing language of what current law is. All pre-July 1, 2024 voter-approved bond payments are excluded from that calculation. And the change that you see here is to remove the temporal limitation. And this is just to say that any voter-approved bond payments, including those occurring on July 1, 2024 or thereafter, would be excluded from the excess spending calculation. So pretty straightforward to understand that one. And all of this, I think, will be relatively simple, at least conceptually, although I'm sure people will have thoughts. Section 2 is the amendment to the threshold itself. So we're jumping back to Title 32, where we have a definition of excess spending. And as you know, excess spending is your per pupil amount, plus those amounts added from the capital construction reserve that exceed a particular threshold. In existing law, as you can see on line 12, that's 118% of the statewide average district per pupil education spending increased by inflation. The proposal here is to lower that excess spending threshold from 118 down to 112. So again, a simple concept to address some of the potential concerns with that approach. What you're going to see at the top of page 3 is a new piece of excess spending, which is, you can think of this as kind of a whole harmless type provision. A school district's excess, and I should back up and say the way that, why I'm going to use the word zero here, the way that excess spending works is it's basically a term that we plug into a calculation. So setting it to zero is a way of ensuring that you aren't doubly taxed on that spending, which is what the excess spending currently does. So a school district's excess spending shall be zero if any of the following conditions is met. So the first two you can think of in a similar way. There is your spending flat. One, the district's education spending is not greater than the district's education spending for the preceding school year. So at the aggregate level, are your budgets no greater than the preceding school year? If that's the case, then your excess spending would be zero. The second piece is a comparison, and this is try to account for some of the discussions that the committee had around declines in student enrollment, right? So what if your budget, or sorry, what if your student count went up? So your budget wouldn't be flat because you have more students to account for, but you actually spent in the same way per pupil. And so that's what you see in 2. You could also meet the condition that the district's per pupil education spending is not greater than the district's per pupil education spending for the preceding school year. So both of the first two are saying if your spending is flat, meaning either that your ed spending is no greater than the preceding school year, or your per pupil spend is no greater than the preceding school year, you would get an excess spending of zeros. The last piece is more discretionary. It does not spell out a built-out process, but it creates an avenue for folks to seek some method of adjustment, basically. So the third method that you could have an excess spending of zero is if the Secretary of Education, with the advice of 3 business managers and 3 superintendents selected by the Secretary, determines that the increase in that per pupil spend above the excess spending threshold was for good cause or beyond the district's control, such as due to emergency capital expenditures or substantial loss of pupils or offsetting revenues. So first 2 pieces are you get an excess spending of zero, even if you're above technically the excess spending threshold, if your ed spend or your per pupil spend is flat or declining. And then the third is you could reach out to the Secretary of Education for this determination that basically the increases in per pupil spend were for good cause or beyond the district control.
And one thing. So really why, what took time to get to today, and we're not talking about this sooner, is just I want to applaud Julia Richter in running the numbers on this caveat, which I forgot to mention in my opening introduction about the whole harmless provision. So she did run numbers on how much that would, less that would catch, so to speak. And so when you do see the summarization numbers of how much would be affected at these different thresholds, it's important to recognize it's a soft cap, meaning it's not definitely going to stop that spending, but it would drive and motivate districts, as I hear many of them do, to get underneath the threshold so as to not incur that double tax penalty.
Last piece, effective date, take effect on July 2026. And because you're no longer doing the allowable growth cap, I have in here language just to change the title and act relating to the excess spending threshold. That's it. That's the whole of the proposal. I'm happy to leave this up or to stop screen sharing, depending on the committee's preference.
Shanda Hardy.
The little I3, whatever that is, the second, is there a trigger for that?
So this, that's a good way of drawing out the point I was making, that I didn't have some robust framework built in.
Okay,
This presupposes that you did something to solicit the secretary's input. It doesn't prescribe what that would be,
okay,
right? It just says the Secretary of Education has determined this. For practical purposes, what I would say is there is some thought that went into stylistically how to draft this. Typically, this has the feel, right, of a substantive provision, right? This doesn't feel purely definitional.
Mhm.
And so typically you wouldn't include a substantive provision in a definition section. And so basically what I would say is, to my mind, depending on the momentum that this has, at some point in the process, like on the House side, I would probably propose creating a section, like an actual substantive section in the green books that captures the excess spending as a section rather than just having it in a definition. And at that point, you could build out, do this, send a report, send your budget to do this. And my concern in putting it in section form at this point was how much material to give people at once, basically, like that it'd be confusing to explain why we're repealing the definition of excess spending and then duplicating it within a substantive section. And so this to me is kind of like getting out the idea, but I agree you could build out more what the actual process would be beyond just saying the secretary approves, right? The secretary approves, assumes that the district sent something to the secretary to be approved.
right, the secretary wouldn't act,
Independently and just decide to evaluate everyone's, right?
okay. And then, I mean, this is probably more questions for Julia about, I was looking at her spreadsheets while you were going over the bill, and it's unclear to me. I mean, the part of it's the font is so super tiny, but the impact of the combination of lowering the threshold with
The whole
hold harmless, or what, it's a threshold of a threshold. It's
Yeah, I think
very
it's slightly
meta.
tweaks the, yeah.
So it's not clear to me. It's almost like if we're lowering the threshold to 112 and then putting these things in here, isn't it actually more efficient to not have to not lower the threshold that much? Like, and that's
Right.
where I'm not sure, what are the interaction effects there? And if we just kept the threshold at 115, would we not
Right.
need this?
Right.
Because of the districts that would need this would be.
You want to know if there's like a meaningful economic difference between just using a different threshold without the whole harmless
Yeah, it seems
as against this lower threshold.
exactly. We might be overcomplicating it with this rather than just having it clean.
I have that summary table that's not what's posted. I'm just digging for it where she did, and it was a very small sliver of less than, I think it was less than $400,000 that the hold harmless provision actually triggered. I'm trying to find that table.
That does sound, of course, I don't want to speak confidently on this, but that sounds vaguely familiar with the effects of the whole harmless or not. Yeah, because the populations that, sometimes we think about these things and we're thinking broadly about all school districts. In this case, we're just only talking about the population of school districts that hit the excess spending thresholds.
Right, yeah.
So it's part of.
It's on our website. You may have to
Yeah.
refresh.
The Julia's.
And if you have to multiply it 10 times, you might be able to read it.
Yeah, it is a little.
I think she's making copies. She is on her way.
Oh,
Okay.
Julia is coming.
To save the day. Oh,
We
sorry.
are safe.
That was not fair to her. Pick up.
Because to get it to a size you can read about one column at a time, which means,
It's a stylistic choice by staff.
yes, well, putting it on, if we put it up there,
I just forwarded you the table.
I'm just not going to expose myself to this potential
no.
liability, and I'm going to.
But if Julia is on her way, then here she is.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, no, I have this table.
Sorry.
What I'm trying to understand is how many districts would be impacted by the whatever, what are you calling it?
I was just saying, hold on.
The hold harmless of the,
I think that shows in that table. So if you look at the two different columns, but I'm walking through Julia's work and she's phenomenal. So I
Julia's here, so she can,
two columns and so you can see some districts above threshold and the number with the hold harmless. And you can see those, for example, at 112%, it goes from 35 to 33 districts. So two districts would have been held harmless for a reduction of, it looks like 400,000.
That's not what the. Oh, I see. I didn't see that top comment.
I think you're going to get some information. Yep.
okay,
I'm going to visit.
Like that.
Before John.
Julia,
Oh, yes.
Oh, wow.
we have any questions about the wording for John?
Yes.
Go.
I do have one. I don't mean to complicate it. It is the last day of crossover Friday afternoon. I just want to say one thing that Don said, maybe it'd be best to bring this up in committee. If you look at the appeals language, which I agree, it should the committee support this appeals language should get refined as it goes forward. But one notion that came to mind, I'm looking to have it in front of me, and for some reason not seeing it. So this is page 3. We're on page 3, Romanette 3 at 3. Right now, because of the way it's structured, is that the school district's excess spending shall be zero if any of the following conditions are met. It might be of interest to the committee to, instead of just zero or nothing, empowering the agency of education to extract out expenses related to, for example, if there was a fire, if there was a major incident and they wanted to just take all the expenses that the district can categorize as subject to that and remove that from the excess spending to have a graduation. I support this language as is, but right now it's zero or nothing in the appeals language.
Yep, that's a good way to describe it. The point is that the secretary makes one determination, whether you're in or you're out. If you make this appeal for good cause or beyond the control of the district, it does not grant the secretary the ability to change the excess spending threshold or exclude particular items, but otherwise subject certain items to the excess spending threshold. It's just you either have excess spending or you don't.
You don't.
And in part, admittedly, there's different ways that you could do this. This is administratively simpler, I presume, to just have a one-time call. And part of the way that I was thinking about it is that this doesn't require the secretary to delve into what items do or don't belong. It makes a holistic decision as to whether or not you're kicked into excess spending or not. And the other point that I would make from an incentive perspective, this is speculative, but just from an incentive perspective, if you have an all or nothing, that's more of a incentive for districts to then control their spending in a way where they know that it's reviewed holistically and they can't have certain items cited pause. So
Okay.
that's some of the thinking. It's not to say that you have to do
Heard
that.
that argument in other contexts.
But that's some of the thinking. You could absolutely do it a different way. And if you wanted to make it more discretionary, I would check the way that it's done.
I guess the conflict would come in where if my spending went up $1,000 a student, but I also had a roof failure and I had to do emergency repairs, I couldn't. The secretary would have to say yay or nay and balance those out because
Yep.
whatever the excess spending was not, I did that plus I had
Exactly.
the emergency.
You'd evaluate it as a package, basically. And I
Yeah.
suppose you're correct, it could cut either way. People could try to smuggle in things because they have legitimate things that are for good cause.
This is 2 years.
So this is slightly different, and there's a reason to back it up in this way. This is an outright amendment to the statutory language for excess spending, but it's worth noting that the foundation formula in Act 73 comes in FY 29, and you're not going to have excess spending at that point. So technically, it really only applies to me.
Yeah. It is looked at as a bridge to when you are going to have pretty much a set amount that you're going to have to budget within. And I know we're going to get thing if it makes it all the way through from the House rather than put, I think it's 100 million in this year to buy down the tax rates. It's to buy them down 1/3 over the next 3 years. Because if all of this hits at once, there will be sticker shock. We have many other issues to deal with, like ramping up and ramping down. And how do we bring all of that spending and tax rates into equilibrium? So
But I think to that point, Madam Chair, one thing that came up in these, in my diving into this is, it seems to me, again, I'm relatively new around here, that as you do the yield bill every year in its current form, and I know that to your point, it goes away. It also wouldn't seem relevant to also simultaneously consider the excess spending threshold as another lever as part of these discussions, which in a way we didn't formally do that a couple of years ago, but if there are major extremes or swings, it seems just consider adjusting this threshold, looking at the variation dispersion of the district by district spending.
you can't use words like variation of dispersion.
But I did do some of that for this though. I agree.
I'd have to go back and refresh my memory. All right. Okay. Committee. Everybody's looking to see what happens to their school. You didn't put them by county.
Some get caught, some don't.
That's the way it always seems to go. So we have an amendment proposal on the table. Well, it hasn't been formally moved.
Well, I said this yesterday.
Oh, Martine, is your hand up? Nope.
Nope, sorry about that.
I appreciate that, that you're proposing similar things to what I was trying to do yesterday. And I'm not sold on the threshold and the review part of it. I think it's kind of overcomplicates it, but I would really like to look at this conversation in combination with the revenue sources, because if we're talking about putting $100 million of general fund into the education fund to buy down taxes, again, we can avoid having to do that if we do a combination of lowering costs and raising revenue for the education fund. and paying for some of the things that are on the education fund that we've added over the last couple of years. And so I would be interested in a package of the two things, this proposal with some adjustments and some version of the 282 proposals that we talked about yesterday. Okay.
We've got standalone bills. Together that can form a package. I'm pretty sure I don't have the votes to do a package. So, given the straw polls we took yesterday, this one is short duration. We're going to have to raise revenue for the education fund. We will be doing that with the second homes tax. But I want to see if we can't get one of these bills out of here. If I put them together, I think they're both dead. And I'm looking for somebody to tell me that they vote for the combined package. And okay, I see Senator Gulick has her hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I would vote for the combined package. I think it's a great way of, as Senator Hardy said, hitting the upward pressure and the downward pressure. So I think it's actually a great way of doing things. I really appreciate Senator Chittenden's effort with this. I think it's a great effort. I will not be supporting it for a number of reasons. One being that, just today and yesterday, we have two bills where we're adding more burden onto schools, and we do it a lot. I'm not comfortable with even a soft cap. I know that this is a soft cap. It's not a hard cap, but I'm not comfortable with that. I have said this before and I'll repeat it. Our private schools have ways of fundraising. They have mechanisms to fundraise. They are not transparent with their finances, so we don't exactly know what's going on. But I am not comfortable with what I think could potentially harm our public schools because they don't have the same ability to fundraise. They're not all in wealthy communities that can fundraise. And for those are just a few of the reasons why I won't be voting for this, but I do appreciate the effort.
At this point, I need a motion to discuss.
I would move S220 favorably with.
No, I just need move to amend at this point.
With some amendment.
So we're moving to
Amendment
amend 220 with
draft number 2.1 dated March 12th, 2026.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can we bring Julia up to talk about the numbers?
yes, we can. Julie, if you want to come talk about the numbers. Sure. And thank you for getting here.
And these numbers would maintain.
We have lots of numbers.
Good afternoon, we're right for JFO. So,
Amazing amount of work.
well, heard the request that folks need to see more
More data.
information. So there are two spreadsheets, two different documents posted on a committee page under my name. Those are the same as the hard copies that you have in front of you. I can go ahead and share my screen, but I worry that it might be too small. Madam Chair, if you have a camera.
It is really small on our screen, so yeah.
All right, so then maybe I'll just talk you through what you have in front of you here. So, the first document that I was taking a step back, the two spreadsheets are very similar. And really what they are intending to do is showing with an adjustment to the excess spending threshold, how that would shake out if it were to be implemented in FY27 using the best available FY27 data that we have at this point in time. We know that there are a number of budgets that have failed We know that there are some budgets that have not yet submitted their public information. So for those failed budgets and for those school districts that have not yet submitted budget information, we're carrying an estimate of 4.2% increase.
Okay.
Just the estimated average state increase. So that's true for both of the spreadsheets.
have a question.
For anybody tuning in, I do just raise something that hasn't come up prior to now, Julia, which is that this is overlaid on FY 27, but this would not apply to FY 27. This is just to give an idea of what it would affect if it was in place this year, but we are contemplating this for FY 28. And so thank you for mentioning that. That was not brought up prior to this discussion.
Great, yes, and that's consistent with all of the modeling that we've been looking at thus far. We at JFO cannot predict how school districts are going to be building their budgets in future years, so we are using the most recent available data. So the difference between the two spreadsheets is that one is including that hold harmless provision that John just walked through, included in the proposed amendment. And the other is showing just a change in the excess spending threshold and what it would look like. I'm sure you care which spreadsheet I start on.
Yeah. Yes, one.
Okay, then let's start on the one that has the staple in the top left corner. It's titled Draft Analysis of Adjusting the Excess Spending Threshold for Senate Finance. What we're looking at here is by school district, using that estimated FY 27 education spending, if the excess spending threshold were to be adjusted in FY 27, which is not proposal, but if it were to be adjusted, how would that impact each district? So what we see here, first few columns should look quite familiar. We've got column A, which is that county designation by AOE, column B, the school district, columns C through F, that's representing the FY 27 data from the Agency of Education, the estimated ed spend, followed by the total excess spending exclusions under current law. You'll recall that that's that debt service payment. So principal and interest for bonds approved prior to July 1, 2024. Column E, that weighted pupil count, and column F, the education spending per weighted pupil, not factoring in the exclusions. And then moving forward, I thought it would be helpful to see, because there are different thresholds that have been discussed in different amendments, it would be helpful to see just these different amounts, what it would look like. So the first columns of excess spending threshold, columns G and H, this is showing that current law FY 27 estimated impact of the excess spending threshold at 118%. So what we see here up at the top is that this excess spending threshold under current law in FY 27 and 118% is 16,470. That's that per weighted pupil spending. So every school district that spends, that's a per weighted pupil spending above 16,470 is double taxed on that amount, except for those exclusions included in column D. And then below that, we see I've included the total count of districts over the threshold. So how many have something that would fall over the threshold? And then there would be 12, estimated 12 in this instance. And then the total excess spending over the threshold. So that's the sum of all dollar figures in column H. All of these other excess spending thresholds, the 116, 115, 114, 112, and 110, follow the same intuition. It's just showing you as that excess spending threshold is ramped down, how many more districts are picked up with each of those percentage points decreasing. Is there any more detail about this that would be walked through, that would be helpful for me to talk about?
Maybe
This is very, Norwich, I hear, is the consent. Why?
With their state district.
They don't control half.
So is that the interstate? Are they subject to the excess spending threshold only right now?
No. For at least per AOE's excess spending. calculations. I defer to John as to how the statute is written.
I mean, I don't know, are the interstates exempt?
This is not a question I've thought about before. There's nothing that speaks to it in the excess spending definition itself. I just, at the risk of this becoming a larger thing, I would prefer to think about it.
Think about it, yeah. I mean, but I think they're also the highest. I mean, if they're the highest, maybe it's this pretty low.
Yes. Mhm.
Are they the highest in the state?
That's my understanding.
Yeah.
And I will say that they have been listed as exempt here because that is how it is carried in these financial files.
Okay.
For those following along at home too, I think what's important to highlight is that column P, so not the column all the way to the right, is what the amendment is proposing. If that's 112%, there's a big steep jump to get to 110%, which is the furthest most columns. So column P is what the amendment would contemplate if this were overlaid with FY27. Am I correct?
If I may, I would just tweak a little, and that's a great segue into the other spreadsheet that doesn't have the staple. And that's, so you should have two copies of documents. So the one that doesn't have the staple is reflective of including that hold harmless provision. So if you really want to see what the amendment would look like.
Wait a minute, I'm not sure I understand, Jen.
Okay, so we're looking at the spreadsheet that doesn't have the staple.
Okay.
For those looking on their computer, titled draft analysis of adjusting the excess spending threshold for Senate Finance, including hold harmless provision in proposed amendment.
Okay,
So what this is doing is this, you'll recall there's that hold harmless provision that essentially says if a district's per weighted pupil spending does not increase compared to the prior year, and or their total education spending does not increase compared to the prior year, then they are not subject to the excess spending penalty. So the way that we do that is we first look at, okay, who did not increase their per weighted pupil spending and or their education spending. So we see here in columns D through E, their FY26 education spending and FY26 per weighted pupil spending. The next columns F through I are showing the exact same FY27 data, estimated data that we were just looking at. Column J, this is that binary metric. Do they fall into the hold harmless provision or not? And a 1 is given to those districts that either did not see an increase in their per weighted pupil spending or did not see an increase in their education spending.
okay.
So any of those districts that have a 1 in this column J, you'll see that sort of regardless of what their per weighted pupil spending is in FY27, they won't be tripping the excess spending threshold. They won't have that penalty. We see in these two cells above column J that there are a total of 26 districts that either did not increase their per weighted pupil spending and or did not increase their total education spending. So there are 26 districts that could fall into this hold harmless provision, dependent on maybe they just naturally wouldn't have any. Maybe they're low spenders and they wouldn't have any. But because this is exempting some of these districts from hitting the excess spending threshold and being subject to the excess spending penalty, we see that fewer districts are going to be impacted with this hold harmless provision than what we were just looking at in the earlier spreadsheet.
Did you?
Yeah, I have a question when you have a minute. What about the districts who their spending has increased simply because they have debt, they're carrying in debt?
This exempts,
That exempts those.
it exempts
All that.
bond indebtedness, right?
Voter-
Why? So I have three schools in my district that are in that scenario, Colchester, Winooski, and Burlington. And Winooski is in that column, but Burlington and Colchester are not.
So the difference is that the bonded debt, those principal and interest payments, assuming that that bond passed prior to the cutoff, the July 1, 2024, that would be an exclusion from education spending for the purpose of calculating excess spending. However, that's not going to be captured in this column J.
Okay, I think I understand, but I'm not
So
sure.
basically, column J is saying, you know, if your education spending didn't increase year over year,
Right.
and you're not subject to the excess spending threshold. So if you didn't,
If you spend it last year, if you spend it again this year, you're not subject to the excess spending threshold because you haven't gone up due to assuming new debt.
exactly. So if the debt service were to remain the same year over year, then I think
But it doesn't.
that would not be the reason that the education spending would be increasing year over year.
Our debts payments aren't staying the same year after year. We're actually like reaching our pinnacle right now.
And you'll go down.
Yeah, it should go down in the next, at some point in the next couple of years, but I'm still, I don't know, I'm not 100% convinced that I'm understanding at this point.
Okay,
Right.
but
Okay.
If let me try with one more answer, and it could be a policy question, and I can't make the argument as to whether or not or how school debt should be included. Strictly from the numbers perspective, the school debt, the debt service exists in a different place in the excess spending calculation than what we're looking at in column J. So column J, we're strictly looking at the hold harmless provision. Who is held harmless from the excess spending threshold in its entirety? And the districts that are held harmless are, you could be held harmless if your ed spending overall doesn't increase year over year, or if the per weighted pupil spending doesn't increase year over year. That's who we're capturing in column J. And those are the districts that would not be subject to the excess spending penalty under this proposal.
Column G is the debt service, correct?
Yes, so column, but before getting to the debt service, column J is just saying which districts would fall into the hold harmless provision.
Right, I get that. Yep.
Column G, to Senator Hardy's point, is capturing what is excluded from the purpose of calculating excess spending. So then we need to say, okay, which districts would still be subject to the excess spending? So for instance, anybody who doesn't have a 1 in column J is still subject to the excess spending penalty if they fall above, if their per weighted pupil spending falls above the threshold. However, for the purpose of calculating that excess spending that's going to be double taxed, we exclude that debt service prior to July 1, 2024 that's captured in column G. And that those exclusions in column G are not double taxed.
okay. We got our hands around that one now. So the only debt service that would be counted would be if you had passed a bond this year or last year. Correct?
So the debt service is always included in the education spending.
Yes,
And yes, the debt service that will be captured in the excess spending penalty is that debt service that was incurred post July 1, 2024.
I thought his proposal got rid of all the debt service.
Oh, then I stand corrected. I did not do that. for-
Okay, you forgot all, that's what I thought. This
Yeah.
would take that all.
Yes.
Oh, okay, I stand corrected. Yes, okay. Strike it from the record, what I said.
Okay. So we can strike out column G.
Well, no, column G
It's denser.
reflects what has already passed.
Yeah.
But it obviously Julia doesn't know what hasn't yet
Yes,
passed.
we don't know what, correct, and the other piece is what we're seeing in column G are the total excess spending exclusions under current law. The data hasn't yet been calculated as, or like collected by the agency as to if that time condition for the excess spending threshold were to be amended. What are the total exclusions? So we've done some preliminary work on that. And the bond bank has provided you with some great data. It seems as though there is a total annual debt service of 11.6 million of additional debt service beyond that July 1, 2024. Across, I think, I don't want to say on the record,
So that currently,
more than 5 districts, fewer than 15.
that's currently not being excluded, but should this bill pass into law, it'd be excluded.
Correct. Plus, anything, any other approved debt. And to the extent that that would or would not impact school district and or voter decisions, I think, right?
Finally decided they fix the leaky roof.
But to that point, Woodstock recently conditionally passed a bond that said they would if in fact that was removed from the excess spending threshold.
That is a high school they've been trying to build for a number of years and have not been able to pass it.
Yeah, on the test.
It reaches a point where
Well, I think it was 60% voter threshold by the bylaws.
It
Okay.
failed.
It was more than a simple majority, yeah.
They hit it this time.
Yeah. The underlying bill, the as introduced. You did some calculations. For how much that would reduce education spending if it was, and it was, what was it, 6? It was a hard cap, it was 67 or 76 million or something.
That was with the preliminary, I
Yeah.
think it was like 65 million. That was with the preliminary lowered spending estimate. I can pull that up, but I will need a minute.
I could speak for the cup on what I recall, those estimates.
Julia's gonna,
Hold up. It went to 67 and then we added the whole harmless as we were discussing and that dropped it to 57. And then we got the updated numbers and my math and Julia's math better was it was about 30 million after we got the revised 4.2% increase in ed spending with the whole
the
harmless.
budgets came in lower than.
That's what I recall. And I think it was like 27, 28, depending on how you did it.
Fine, yeah.
Okay, Senator.
Pulling it up.
Okay.
Senator,
Sorry, do we know do we have the numbers on how much this would save taxpayers?
that's what we were just talking about, 30 million.
No, it depends. No, it's in the top column, the
This is-
top row.
21 million, if
21.
they did all of it. Correct. They don't have to, it is a soft cap.
So if they don't, they would be double taxed on about $21 million. So they would be, there's soft cap pressure on $21 million worth of spending. Yeah. If this were overlaid with FY 27, it is not. So this would be overlaid next year. We have no idea what that year looks
Okay.
Well, on this, while Julia's looking for that number, I like doing this cleanup. I appreciate Senator Hardy's, as part of this greater conversation, but that feels like a conversation that we'll be having more like April, May as the final, the final appropriation
Yeah.
bill comes out and everything. And I do, I think a soft cap with $21 million of possible would be a little more compassionate to our school districts than the as introduced, which is a hard cap. I don't know, have you found that number? Julia?
Yes. So so you'll recall that there was also the back and forth that we were looking at. I think there's a lot of numbers in folks' minds because we were looking at the FY 25 to FY 26, and then the FY 26 to FY 27, and then we have the updated FY 27 numbers. So the estimates have changed as we've been looking at different sets of data. And there's also been that the S220 as introduced, you'll recall prior to town meeting, you were talking about that dual test. So looking at the greater of either the allowable spending or the education spending increased by NIPA is what would have been permitted.
Yeah.
And using all of that, the estimate would be, if it were to exist in FY 27, 21 million.
It dropped 21 million.
So we're
Because
pretty
of
close. Because the impacts of that were the decrease in school district budgets. So the December 1 letter was estimating 5.8% increase. Now the average increase is 4.2%, but for the education spending growth. And the
Two-part test.
the proposal of the two-part test, yes.
Okay.
But our,
Yeah, so that,
That's stuff. You.
that's it.
so I do think that that's an important note, that when looking at the excess spending threshold compared to the cap included in S220, the 21 million that is being shown in column T is, and I know this was spoken about, but it's important to keep in mind, this is what is estimated to be over the threshold, and how school districts would respond, I don't know. So either that would be cut, or that would be double passed, or likely it would fall somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. If something really unpredictable, awful happens, we can always come back and not withstand.
Well, there's a some.
Yeah, there is an appeals. Okay, Sandra Martin. Sandra Gillick.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. So I do not feel comfortable going down to the 112. I mean, we're at 118 and going down to 112 is a pretty significant drop. My proposal yesterday was 115, and that's an area that I feel much more comfortable with. And if we went to 115, I think getting rid of the hold harmless thing makes sense. I mean, I think the hold harmless thing is a little funky anyway, and I don't really like it, so I would feel more comfortable at 115 without the hold harmless. I still, again, would love to take this into consideration with more of a package and include revenue. I hear you that you're not interested in doing that, but I think 112 is too much, and would really feel much more comfortable at 115.
Sandra Gillick, and then we'll have discussion.
One of my issues with the appeals process is it's going to be at the discretion of the secretary, and I don't have a lot of confidence that that decision might not be the right. I do have confidence that it might not be the right one. So I again appreciate the appeals process, but I don't feel comfortable with it, to be honest. And Senator Beck, I appreciate your point about there's going to be more tax bills coming to us at the end of the session, but the end of the session is going to be very chaotic. It's a campaign year. We're all going to be wanting to get out the door. I would love to see this attached to either Senator Hardy or Senator Cummings' proposal. So I don't think we should give up on that.
Agreed.
Okay. Discussion on the proposal is to go from 112 to 150. Discussion on that. proposal.
I thought we were talking about Senator Chittenden's proposed
The
amendment.
proposal right now is the amendment
Yeah.
is to go lower the threshold from 118% to 112. Senator Hardy has said she would feel more comfortable with 115. I'm not sure Senator Hewitt would feel comfortable with anything. Okay, so,
I would like to state that Senator Chittenden's proposed amendment of the 112.
okay,
What I would just say to that, to your previous comment, Madam Chair, is this can be revised. So next year, whoever's sitting in these seats can get adjusted at that time in the BAA or otherwise as has done before. I am comfortable at 112, but again, this conversation was planned to be had. I wish it wasn't on the last day before crossover, but I'd love to hear thoughts from all of them.
Yeah, by the time anybody is back in these chairs and getting going, school districts will be well on their way of making their budgets. They would not be able to be just adjusted for next year.
That's why it was important to me to have the appeals process, because in those circumstances, if this does, then I do trust the agency of education to handle contingencies and concerns. It's not like it's important for me to have that in.
okay.
It is simply set up conditions under which the trigger would be pulled, and at that point, the agency of education would do something. Perhaps more or less than what we have in here. Or it's
No,
not an effective emergency trigger.
I just say to that, if I may, that I think the language in a way is open enough to be
To do
that,
that.
but that's debatable.
You know, we don't have any realistically in 2027. We don't realistically have a way of changing district spending at that point. We never do. We like to think we do in early January, but we really don't. But what we do have, and what we do all the time, is we impact tax rates. And I think that's what Senator Chittenden was speaking to here, is that, yes, if we came back here next year, we always have the ability to change tax rates and penalties and all that kind of stuff.
Money in,
That's right, but we're not gonna change their spending. They're gonna do their best, and then we're gonna do our best.
and this is further.
Yeah.
Downward pressure, which was the purpose of the original bill.
Yeah.
Was to try and keep some downward pressure on spending. Senator Hewitt.
Question for Senator Chittenden, and I'm not trying to be flip or do a got you or anything, but can you give me any examples of what gives you confidence in the Secretary of Ed and the AOE right now?
Because I see their team doing the job as best of their abilities, and they have not lost my confidence because of it. I would just leave it at that.
And I'm not going to get into a character discussion on the agency's
It's
patient.
not a character discussion. I'm asking for evidence of their success.
Yeah, thank you. Has been asked and answered.
I'll just say, I mean, we've had Ken Bates and Kelly Murphy in here at least 2 or 3 times this year, and they seem to be really on top of it. I have a lot of, and that's who we're gonna be dealing with, really, is those two, and I think it's all we need.
Improving. Sandra, have you made a motion?
Did
You did.
it did. So
Okay,
repeat it.
I can second that, if needed.
So I usually will grab 3.2.
okay.
Let me get to the timestamp up.
I think it's 2.1.
2.1 March 12th.
Okay, so we now have a formal motion on the floor to approve. And then this is a strike all amendment, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So to strike. There's the bill number 220 and replace it with draft number 2.1 dated 3/12/26 at 4:35 PM. So far, I haven't seen any of those as AM, so I can live with them. And it's the last day of crossover. So that is the motion. Yeah, are there any amendments to this amendment?
Well, I suggested getting rid of the funky appeals and fresh, hold harmless thing and removing 115%. That,
Is that a formal motion?
sure, I would make that motion.
Okay. Senator Hardy has moved that. We move the excess spending threshold up from 112 to 115. And that we remove the appeals process.
Well, all of the threshold, so like starting on C, like C on page 3, C,
Okay.
1, 2, and 3. Yeah,
Okay, so 3, and we will strike we will strike section C. Okay. Is there? Have I got a draft?
Let's see if I can get him. I think he's in the house. I think he's booked it out already.
See, well, we'll take a vote and then. Because right now this is just striking, so,
Yeah.
and changing. Okay. Is there further discussion on this proposal of amendment?
I just want to say I really appreciate the effort to compromise. I think some of us are working really hard to compromise in this committee, and it would be great if some other folks would join in the compromise. It's feeling kind of one-sided right now.
Is there any further discussion of the amendment? If not, on this one, I'm just going to say, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Okay, I've got that 5-2. So now we have a move to amend, replace S-222 with a strike off of draft 2.1, 3/12/26 at 4:35 PM. Is there further discussion on this one?
I'll just say, I think this is a big compromise. I think that this has been a really informative process for me to get to this soft cap with the excess spending threshold. And I've learned a lot from many members around the table. So I don't see this as one-sided. I see this as getting to a good policy to address what I'm hearing from voters regarding spending in our education system.
Okay. Further discussion. If not, on this one, will the clerk call the roll?
Senator Chitman,
Yes.
Senator Beck,
Yes.
Senator Hardy,
No,
Senator Brock,
Yes.
Senator Gulick,
This is just to strike the initial bill with Senator Chittenden's.
yes,
Two men.
Chitman,
It's
Chittenden's amendment.
Then we're going to vote on it again.
No,
No,
no, amending this,
Okay.
doing a strike off amendment.
Okay, no.
Okay,
Senator Matos, yes. Senator Cummings,
yes. You can call that.
5-2-0.
All right, that has passed 5-0. Thank you, committee. This was the easy one.
Would you like to report that?
It's your amendment. You wanna,
You got it.
you can report that. And, we now have today, find my way through all the charts. 282. This is, we have 3 proposals, that came up yesterday. And basically the changes are where let's new computer just not there it goes. We have, as introduced, we have a Chittenden, a Hardy. And I had asked to see what the numbers look like on 282. And we got all of those yesterday. And Patrick had a nice draft of the financial differences, and basically the differences are at what level of income you start at, and let's see, it was what level of income, and of what level of income. Where you start this tax, one was at 500, one was at the federal 250, and the other was at 1 million, and I believe that's per individual. The original bill proposes that it go to school construction. I believe Senator Hardy's it went, and Senator Chittenden, that both went to education, which, and that it be used to buy down some of the costs that have gone in there. I would hasten that we have removed things from the ed fund also.
Mine was specific, mine had intent language saying the
Intent,
intent is
yeah.
for school
Because-
letters and
But it both would send this senator, the original bill, which was Senator, Novoski's would have put it in a special, this education.
not just revenue. There were two revenue sources in the original bill. The other one
Okay.
was the second homes tax. That would have gone
That's
into a
all right.
capital construction fund. This revenue, I believe, just went to the general fund.
The general
I could be
fund,
wrong
that
about that, but I'm
way.
pretty
Okay.
sure it's the general.
And so we've got two proposals to put money into the ed fund.
After a discussion yesterday, a really smart person gave me a round and said, you know, the other thing you could do is just take universal meals and put it in the Agency of Health Services, and then because that's paid for with the general fund, and then we're not actually allocating, we're not sending the money. So if universal meals wasn't covered out of the ed fund and instead came from AHS, where it's part of the general fund,
Well,
would be another way to.
anything that we do,
That's using general fund and creating more of a hole over there. So,
No, because the revenue, if this new revenue passed in any of these cases, would just go to the general fund, and then we'd also take the expense of universal meals and put it into the general fund so that we wouldn't have to what do you want to call it, cordon off this revenue streams, or that as the tax department, if they're here, to cordon it off.
okay.
I see.
Jake, do you wanna?
Yeah,
Okay,
Jake Feldman, Tax Department. Just whispering about that to Julia. Mechanically, I don't know how we could isolate just this part of income taxes and send it somewhere, like the education fund. That would be extremely complicated. One option, which is similar to what you're saying, is you let it accrue to the general fund, which is where all the IT goes. But you do something like take some of the meals and rooms tax that's split between the general fund and the ed fund and increase the share that goes to the ed fund by the same amount. That is easy to do.
The problem with doing that, I mean, I appreciate the complexities of trying to split out the money, but the only way, I think it's important to have intent language in so if we did that, we would need to have some kind of intent language saying this portion of the meal and room tax is for these purposes, because without it, it gets kind of lost over the years of what we've done. I mean, it was sort of a, political policy choice to do what we did originally, and now we're trying to make it work. I would like to make like a choice to say, this is the intent of why we're doing this. We're trying to increase revenues in order to cover existing costs.
It seems to me the easiest thing to do, because the general fund is just, the meals cost is just a cost that's figured out in every school budget, and it's compensated by federal money. And so if you want to raise X million and you want it to cover the cost of universal meals, you just let that income tax or income derived revenue go to the general fund, and you move the cost of meals into the general fund, knowing that they may well send it back to us without the money. But that would be, I think, the cleanest way to do this, rather than getting 2/3 rather than 1/3 of.
Is this or is this not education funding? Is this or is this not education funding?
I think it is, but
Well, I mean, one of the things I'm thinking, frankly, the whole term of education funding, we're in a competition. We're in a competition in terms of how things are reported. States report things differently. And one of the concerns I have may be, to some extent, what we are calling education funding, some other states are not.
Right.
And those states that are not have lower education spending, and we are in a competition in which, as we seem to be climbing our way to the top, no matter what, that's going to create a problem for us in the long run. And the more that perhaps we can address some of that right now, because what isn't education funding shouldn't be there as education funding. So it's services fund or what have you, but it's not education.
Well, I think, so you're right that what we include as education funding is broader than many states. Also, many states don't have an education fund in the same way that we do. But many states have one general fund that they spend for all of their, their education and their regular general government expenses. And so since we have this cordoned off education fund because of our unique funding system, then the sort of trend has been, well, anything that is related to education gets paid more out of the education fund. So,
But as I say, it places us at a competitive disadvantage
well, I mean,
as a general rule.
I'm not sure exactly what.
okay, well, we would be
But
taking
it-
this out of educational spending. And we would be raising money to cover the cost in the general fund, but it would then not show on our ed funding calculations. I think that's what I'm hearing. Okay. I have a whole lot of very puzzled looks. Would you like to take about a 10-minute break to think about this?
Maybe a 3-year break would be appropriate.
I
I don't
can't
think
grant
it's
that.
I think there's a real, there's certainly a conversation to be had as to whether universal school meals should be an education fund expense or it should be an AHS expense over in the general fund. And that's, I could go either way,
And should we put income money
And so,
into the
yeah,
ed fund?
so so if we're gonna, hypothetically, if we say that, universal school meals or any other expense in the education fund is a general fund expense,
Done some curriculum requirements.
yeah, and we want to send it over there. And cab off, I don't know, some of the sales tax or the rooms and meals tax or the purchase or whatever you want to cab off. To send the money over to the general fund to pay for that. Fine. I think where I start to get lost is where within that we start raising the revenue. Increasing taxes. That's where I kind of, I'm. The first part of the conversation, I think that's definitely a conversation we can have, but the raising the revenue is where I start to get lost.
Okay. As I'm watching clocks.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the far end of the table, not the screen. Is there anything, anybody down there that would support raising additional revenue at this point? Okay,
It was from a casino?
That's organic.
that is not in your jurisdiction.
Can I say something?
Yeah,
Well, I mean, Senator Beck, you and I
Yeah.
have had this conversation before. I mean, raising new revenue means lowering other revenue if it's used to offset existing education expenses. And that's what I was trying to do in my proposal, is to say, okay, what we want to do is lower property taxes. We want to lower that kind of tax because that's the tax that's really,
Right.
really making people concerned right now.
So that.
And so like raising new revenue to offset that
Yeah.
is a wash. It's a different.
Right, that's a tax reform conversation, which is a different conversation from increasing revenue.
For the tax committee.
okay, Senator Gulick, we've got a discussion going here, then I'll recognize.
Yeah, let me finish my thought.
Yeah,
So that is certainly, I mean, it's a different conversation from increasing taxes. And I think, and I said yesterday that if we're gonna talk about education, tax reform, then I think there are certainly implications with the general fund, and I view that as more of a conversation later in the session as we start to.
Yeah,
figure out.
but the House is gonna be sending us over. a
They
bunch of
certainly will.
stuff. And so if we don't
That-
have anything that we've fleshed out that we can support, then we're just reacting to their ideas instead of saying, oh, and we have
Well-
ideas too. And
I mean, that they are, and that's our vehicle, that's our place to put the Senate's position on what we want that tax reform to look like.
well, what we just did is tax reform, because that is, it has implications for the education fund and education taxes.
What we
And
just did.
the one we just voted on. And so you can't have the thing we just voted on as 220.
Oh.
So, you know, that's reform. That's different. That's changing how,
I
raising how much.
wouldn't agree with you.
And so if we're gonna have the expense conversation, let's have the revenue conversation too and have it together. And it's shocking to me that nobody, with the exception of one person on the committee, wants to like seize the connections between those two and how it's a logical conversation to have together.
I think we just did. If you overlay the spending threshold is 21 million. If we save 21 million in the ed fund and school meals cost 21 million. In effect, savings covers the cost of school meals.
okay,
Right? If you save 21.
Not unless we say this is you know, what we're gonna replace the cost of school meals with. You know, there's no outward connection to the universal school meals expenses in this. There's also a soft cap.
remember, this is a transition to the foundation formula that we voted on last year. When that comes in, there will be definite limitations. I am trying to see if there is a path forward. I have 3 no's on raising revenue. I have one senator who's signing his name to a bill. I have, Senator Gulick, I'll go to you, your hand is up. But this is just questions on the proposal before us, which I think is, if we agree to raise this revenue, where does it go? If we want it to go to cover the cost of universal school meals, then do we put it in the ed fund or do we move school meals to the general fund? Which I think would be cleaner, but that's where the discussion is.
Are we looking at the bill as introduced or one of the amendments?
We are looking at the bill as introduced. I'm trying to find out if I'm going to have the votes to raise any revenue before I start on how much revenue, because that's basically it, is where we start. It's just different compilations of how and how much revenue we're going to raise. Plus Senator Chittenden had a couple other things attached, salt workaround and.
So I'd say, Senator Gulick, I think we're just talking about all the amendments and the original bill right now in general. Did you have another comment or?
I wanted to remind folks that the top 1% in Vermont will be receiving federal tax cuts of $60,000 a year, which is more than many Vermonters make in a year. And the top 20% in the aggregate will be getting tax cuts in the hundreds of millions of dollars.
Senator, we had testimony from the tax department yesterday that what they got was an extension of the tax cuts they got in 2017 with the jobs and tax cut bill, whatever that was called. We made changes to the tax code at that time to recapture it. So they are not making a new $60,000 a piece. I assume that's rounding up the 57 that's coming to me. That we adjusted for those claims when they were, those reductions when they were originally made. Is that 6 years ago? So it's not, I think that's what I heard yesterday. Yeah. So it's not new money. This would be further adjustment on those individuals who are not all the same.
Okay, so just to be clear, the top 1% in the state of Vermont is not going to be receiving tax cuts. Speaking, I'm asking the tax.
Depending, most of these tax cuts where we're losing money and we're going to see adjustments coming from the House is in the corporate tax. When we went through the tax cuts this year, and I'm looking at Jake, we were not anticipating an additional loss in revenue.
But they had HR 1 not passed, those people would have
gone away.
They would have, their tax
Beg
rates
the
would have been
question
higher. It did, you're right, Senator Gulick, in that if HR 1 had not passed, they would have had higher taxes.
Right.
So their taxes were lower than they would have been had HR 1 not passed.
Right. But that begs the question, if we raised our taxes on them to mitigate the original tax cut, are we then obligated to lower our taxes? I mean, why is it okay to go up? Or
My argument for doing something with S282 has nothing to do with HR 1. It is about the pressure that most of our constituents are feeling are on property taxes. And so if we can raise revenue in a different way that impacts fewer Vermonters, and fewer Vermonters who, by the way, have more money, then that is a better swap. And so replacing problematic revenue, more problematic revenue with less problematic revenue in order to solve the problem.
That I can live with. I have a problem with talking about the rich the way if we talked about any other group, we would all be in serious trouble.
I don't think anyone's doing that, Madam Chair. I think people are making arguments about tax policy and who it's impacting.
not in this committee, but in the emails I'm getting.
We cannot control the email.
I know.
thread, unfortunately.
So
We
I'm
can
trying to
have a
control the
conversation and
discussion.
about tax policy.
And the discussion right now is that they did not receive a new tax cut. They received one 6 years ago, and the state adjusted its tax code to recoup some or all of that. All wealthy taxpayers file different tax forms. They are not all the same. We have a proposal to tax a section of income that is taxed at the federal level. That yes, the state could use additional revenue. I've got 3 folks that are not going to vote for a tax increase. We were told yesterday that the administration did not support this, which I take as it's pretty likely to get vetoed. We can go forward, but I'm trying to find a road forward. So the proposal as we have it is to raise this tax, and I will cede my 500,000. I was just trying to make it more of a wealth tax than starting at 250,000, which is not. That's 2 teachers in some school districts. So the proposal I have is to start it at $1 million or to start it at 250,000.
Well, I think, I mean, your 500 is in the middle.
My
I think
500
that
is in
could
the
be on the
middle.
table. I wonder if you might consider just doing the 3 levels, so married, filing jointly, and single. 500,
Yes, I
like,
do. I
between
heard that
500
yesterday. That
across
was
the board.
just for discussion purposes to see how the numbers played out.
So I'll just say this, when it comes to taxation, I think we need to align with the benefit principle that where we draw the revenue source should be loosely related to what it is intended to do. That's why we have transportation revenues, fund the transportation system, we have income, general income taxes to fund generally the cost of the state. So with that being said, I don't want to raise a wealth tax just because somebody that the rich are benefiting from HR1. I do want to find ways to calibrate our revenue streams to fund the programs and services that this legislature and this governor ultimately approves. And conservative friends of mine have said multiple times that it's all about tax calibration, fairness, and finding ways to equalize things. So to say this, the quiet part out loud, and I would echo something about what the chair just said. I can support a revenue increase. I just want to get it to a place where we have more than just Democrats vote for it, because I'm also a realist. And if we can't find a rational, balanced approach that draws revenues from one area and then pulls it from another one, then this is just going to be a Democratic bill. It's going to go along, and then we're going to feel good that we're drawing and funding these sources, but it's just not going to get us to where we, I think, want to be, which is just good, sensible tax policy. So I'd bring the conversation back to yesterday, and I like how you split this day apart. Are there ways to get a balanced approach to this where we incorporate other things for a grand bargain? I'll just say it. I see S312 is on next. I know that has cost implications. I keep joking about casinos, but you have a bill that wants to explore the feasibility of casinos in Vermont. I am hesitant on this, as I've said, but
That raises its own revenue.
I know, but I would support it if a community wanted to raise their hand instead of one.
You want
What are you saying? Okay.
We don't have that bill.
Are there
Senator, I was trying to do this yesterday with my bill, and I've been shot down so many times that I was trying to make a package where we could talk about things on both sides, and now you're bringing up casinos and that.
I say this, that S220 is important because I do see that as having a feasible path forward to inform the discussion, and to the chairs and points that I'd echo. It's conflating it with this revenue thing that there's a lot of opposition and objections to. I don't think gets us anywhere closer to a crossing of policy that's going to get to the finish line. So I'm sorry that you feel like that was dismissive of that. We're looking at S-282, this big bill withdrawing revenue sources from lots of different locations in a broader discussion. And I'm just saying, are there things that can make this come to a place where we're balancing revenue streams, accomplishing a variety of different policy objectives?
Okay, I'm gonna stop the discussion about motivations and if what we are trying to do is find a way to raise revenue and then impact the cost that are hitting us the hardest, which is the property tax, then the cleanest way to do that is to take, I think you're gonna have to go with my 500 and we're gonna have to scale that, or the other ones are, you're at $1 million for an individual.
But an important thing that to further expound upon possible path forward, non-starter is too strong of a word, but I do not support taxing capital gains for the reasons I articulated previously. So if those are excluded in this discussion, I'm more happy to continue.
Okay, but that's need food calculate.
Okay.
So the notion that came yesterday, if we want to further down the path where we pass something that I don't see support from my Republican colleagues, but you want more than that 10 million that might be defensible, is right now it's at 4% starting at those 4 thresholds, but you could incrementally step that net income investment tax to not be just 4% of those thresholds, but phase it in at like 1% and then 2% and 3%. So that if you're making less money, you're getting what we do with other tax policies. I mean, tax department needs things to do, right?
Yeah.
Definitely. But to get that out by the end of today, I might echo the comment from Senator Beck earlier that I do see this as part of a broader and actual feasible discussion in the larger scope of how this process works, for better or for worse, when there's a lot of things on the table at the end of the session and we have the miscellaneous tax bill where a lot of these things get tacked onto it. So I'm fine with punting as well.
If we do that, I mean, at some point today, I will declare us an impasse and send us on. That will end this bill as a bill. All things are able to be discussed, and there is a major yield, and I'm not sure where things have been attached. I know that that committee has also been having some very difficult discussions on a lot of these same topics.
I'm hearing that the bill is not gonna be a one-page sure.
No, and it's not coming attached to miscellaneous tax. So, there are ways, and there's still a budget that hasn't been put together. There's issues with, I believe there was 25 million more in revenue from the corporate tax included in something that isn't coming in. I don't know, there's some issue going on, the estimated revenues, and so we don't know where the budget's gonna be or what's gonna be in or out of the budget, and that will be the end of the session. Senator Gulick.
Thank you, because it's awkward for me to join in the conversation from Zoom, so I appreciate you calling on me. I know we're not discussing motivations, but I want my voters and my constituents to know that I see their pain, because a lot of Vermonters are feeling a lot of pain right now. And this isn't to pick on rich people who are going to be getting tax cuts. That's not what this is about. This is about raising revenue for the folks who are suffering because of Medicaid cuts, insurance subsidy cuts, SNAP benefit cuts, inflation, high healthcare costs, like that is what this is about. And so I, again, would love us to work together as a team and have a little bit of cooperation and collaboration here. I know not everyone's comfortable with raising revenue in the form of taxes, but I think this is an opportunity for us to do right by our people, the people of Vermont who are hurting right now. So I would like to see one of the proposals move forward.
Okay. Which proposal? And what do we just raise the revenue, which means it will fall to the general fund and let them use it? Do we raise the revenue and switch a cost from the ed fund to the general? And that could also be the OPA, but OPEB.
Yep.
Who sounds like Powell to me, but
I would still like to fund school construction, but if we're not going to do that, I am okay with sending this money to the general fund if we do what Senator Beck said, which is move the universal school meals over there as well.
my proposal. Kirby, do you have something that we're running amok on?
No, I'm hearing a lot of things, but I don't know which of the things I should be writing down.
We don't have any proposal on the table right now.
I can put one on the table if
Okay.
you want. I mean, I have one on the table, but sounds like that one is not gonna go, which is the original thresholds that match
your proposal?
that, pardon me,
Was that a formal motion?
I can move my proposal.
Oh, no, remove, if you made a formal motion to amend, then I don't think.
No,
you
I
did.
didn't,
Okay.
I haven't made an emotion, a motion, my amendment that I presented yesterday, along with yours and Senator Chittenden, would have put it at the same levels as the federal threshold.
My favorite part about working the one is the amount of.
Okay. I hear.
And then yours would be at 500,000, so yours is the middle one, so it seems to me that that's where we look for compromise. And, but this is just compromise between the three of us and more potentially, and it sounds like Senator Gulick, so I don't know if that's enough for you, but, I would propose that we do the 500,000 with three thresholds, though, that, you know, kind of the equivalent thresholds that are in the original bill. So for filing single, married, filing jointly, filing separately, and they're usually,
500,000 would be the married.
yeah,
Yeah, very finally, correctly.
and then you would move
That's
it
where
there.
the income.
And then, what I'm hearing from Senator Chittenden is he doesn't want to do capital gains, but that would take away a lot of the revenue, if we didn't do that. But I'm also hearing from you a sort of tiered kind of thing, like 2, 4, 6 kind of thing. So do you need to have both, or would you be okay doing one of those, doing the tiered but including capital gains?
Because also we presently have 40% capital gains. That was the discussion yesterday. Exclusion,
Right, well, that's excluded from
state
income tax, so I mean, we could do a similar kind of 40% exclusion on these capital gains. I don't know if that's workable. I'm looking at the two tax guys over there, like, if we had a similar.
by extra.
We could draft, yeah. No, but you wouldn't be doing a drafting.
Well, no, but I know people know, but like,
Yeah.
In the tax department,
administratable, it's the same, it would be the same 40%, you know, so we could do a 40%
Okay,
exclusion,
so it would
which
be
would
on the
be consistent,
taxable capital.
Senator Chittenden, with what we have now. And then we could do just a 4%, and that would potentially still make it real money. But it would, you know, not be as much capital gains. And it would only be anything, there's still the 500,000 threshold, so. It wouldn't catch everybody's capital gains because they would have to.
So if you wanted to be drafted like an exclusion, it would mean that fewer taxpayers would hit that threshold. And
Correct,
then
yeah.
it would become marginal from there, so. If someone had 350,000, which is what the income tax exclusion caps on.
Mhm.
So let's just use that example. 350,000 of capital gains excluded. Let's say you had $1 million, just to,
Make it easy, yeah.
yeah, and let's say you're married, so we have the 500,000 threshold. So you take the 350 off of it. At least I'll be with the math. The 650 that's not excluded. So that's 150 over the 500, which could be subject to tax.
Mhm. At
Yeah.
at
And
4%.
then you would, and if you do the marginal rates, then we
Like
have to
2,
figure
4.
it out of that 150, at
I
like
guess
what
I-
point would you hit the new rate?
Right, I guess I would say that. If we did the marginal, if we did all those things, maybe we don't need the marginal rate, I don't know, because it starts to. Just whittle it so much that, there's not much there, so. What do you think, Thomas, or Senator Schick?
Can I ask a question to Kirby? I just want to make sure I'm understanding what we are, this bill does. I think it does it this way, and it framed around Minnesota. This is what I understood. Minnesota $1 million tax for 1% to fund universal meals was just on these passive income sources. So if somebody has a salary that they make $300,000-$400,000, like this, a salary, so not passive income, that would not be included in the million threshold. Is that correct?
So the Minnesota, so Pat Dickerson, Justice Office, the Minnesota threshold is $1 million on investment income.
Investment. Is what we're contemplating right now the same, or are we considering regular income and then above it?
This is modified adjusted gross income, which is just ADI plus the foreign.
So then I wouldn't support that. What I do support is if this was just on passive income, those net investment income, the income that you don't have a job where you're getting paid hourly, you're working hard for benefits. This is just that type of revenue. Then I do support having some revenue drop from that to pay for kids in schools.
That's what this is, it's not investment income, that's what 282 is.
That clarification on Pat, have you read the capital gains is left out?
We're talking, there's 282 and there's Minnesota. You asked about Minnesota.
And then I asked if this
Yeah,
doing
I
it
think,
to
I
amend
don't,
does it that way.
They include capital.
But what about salaries? Salary.
none of the proposed, not ours doesn't either.
Okay,
Ours is just the passive income as well.
that's what I wanted to.
Yes.
So
It's
with
not-
anyone that has 100 million in passive income. But. We were talking about income levels. Some you started at. I thought it was with an adjusted gross income of 250,000.
Yeah, so again, how it's structured is, it's the lesser of two different thresholds. One is your all of your investment income or the amount that exceeds that threshold. So if you set it 500,000, that means that, the lesser of anyone earning less than 500,000 for any source of income. This is modified adjusted gross income, to be specific.
Yeah.
If you set it at 500,000, then any taxpayer who has less than 500,000 would never be subject to this. It starts to become a question when they have net investment income, as in interest, dividends, capital gains, rents and royalties, non-qualified annuities, et cetera.
Yeah.
They have that income, plus they exceed the 500,000. And then it would be the lesser of the two. So if you only exceed it by 10,000, then that would be the lesser, and it would be 4% of 10,000.
Okay.
If you have a lot of wage income, but you only have a little bit of investment income, the lesser of could be the investment income. So you could have 10, 20,000 in investment income, and then the rest, So it's the lesser of those two things.
Okay, if I were filing at 250,000, or 100,000. But I had 500,000 in investment income. That would be, that doesn't show up, right?
If you have 500,000 investment income and 100,000 in wages,
In wages, yeah.
then you would exceed the 500, unless you say your modified adjusted gross income is a total of 600,000. You would exceed that, the modified adjusted gross income threshold by 100,000. Your, investment
Okay, it
income.
is being, we are taxing it now as part of that passive income is being included
For income tax?
for income tax.
Yes.
Okay, so this would be saying whichever is,
You would have in your example, under the way that
yeah,
you're discussing this, investment versus tax would result in 100,000 of that being taxed at an extra 4%.
okay.
In your example.
Extra because it's already.
Because we're losing
Yes,
500,
in addition
so
to how it's
over
already
the
being taxed
500.
under income.
Right, but it's the lesser of, so you'd
Yes.
be taxed on the smaller amount.
I don't think so this is gonna be on top of what we already have as a pretty progressive and fair tax rate. And so if that's 8.75% up there, and then this would be the 4% on top, and then you can do the effective rate, but we're talking about getting to be, would that be the highest state income tax in the country? No. What's that?
Does it go on your
California.
income?
California. Okay, so we'd be second to California.
No, it's not income tax.
And so this is a form of income. This is.
It is,
passive
but
income.
it's not an apples to apples comparison.
That's or not earned.
Okay.
Not earned it.
It's a different tax base than the income tax, so.
Yeah.
It would be hard to compare.
But that income is taxed at the income tax rate and then also at the 4%.
Yes.
So
They overlap, it's just not the same exact tax base.
Okay, so on a portion of your income, it would be an extra 4% tax.
And only one other state has done this as of now, Minnesota.
Go, okay.
Yeah, just clarifying something, Jake Feldman Tax Department, Minnesota does it. They have the same income thresholds for Magi as the federal. But in Minnesota, you need to have at least $1 million of this before you start paying tax.
Joint filers,
Anybody,
joint filers or single filers or
yeah, all the filing statuses follow the same threshold as federal, but I think any type of filer, you need to have $1 million of this passive income.
Okay, so if we only have 1,000 millionaires or somewhere in there, I think we can assume that not all of them are making their million on investment income. So
thinking of
we're
patterns.
looking at a fairly small tax base on this one. I'm feeling, I was reading the statistics, like, I think it was Arizona has almost 75,000 millionaires. That's a very different tax base that we have, and I'm just wondering at what point we reach impasse.
I'm close to there, but
Okay,
Patrick's point, Patrick's numbers, I have 972 filers would be affected at 9,700,000, 500, 100 rates. Do you have in your mind at all of the 972, what percent of those filers would have been the joint filers at the million versus the 700 versus the joint that had filed separately?
I can estimate it, but
That's what are we talking?
I haven't,
No,
I could.
No, it's fine.
In theory.
Things are not that crossover. This is the artificial construct that we use to guide policy decisions, and I'm happy to stick here all afternoon and keep diving into this, but I'm also, it's been a heck of a long week. I'm also happy to just declare impasse and just pick this up as we go forward into the session.
I think I'm reaching the point of impasse on this one. This is a tax. We will have other tax bills coming. We might be able to find a more elegant way or simpler way to do this.
But ideally, through long term, what we should also be doing is we should be measuring the income that we get from actions like this versus the income we lose or potential income we lose based on the efforts that we spend to bring people to Vermont. We have a number of programs that are focused on bringing wealthy people to Vermont. And the reason we do that is because they give a much larger contribution to paying for things like schools and healthcare and so on. For every one that we can bring, if you look at the numbers that we're looking at right now on the tax bill of who pays what. And I'm just very concerned that we don't shoot ourselves in the foot in the process that we're taking.
I think that is not, that is a not fair way of looking at it, because people who have lower incomes are spend a higher percentage overall of their income on both on taxes and also spending locally in our local economy and investing in our local economies in a way that is as valuable. And it's a really elitist approach to be like, all we want to do is attract rich people.
No, it's not.
To our state.
I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is a practical matter that we are interested in tax revenue and getting as much tax revenue as we can in the easiest way that we can that makes sense. Getting tax revenue from rich people is just as good as getting tax revenue from poor people, and we don't get as much tax revenue. I'm being very practical in saying that
That's kind of ironic that you're saying that after you're talking about not wanting to tax rich people.
This is getting into an argument, no, and I don't think that's, but if I spend 10% of my revenue, you figure the top 7% contribute 50% of the hard cash. It's maybe, well, a lesser percentage of their income than it is of mine. It's still hard cash that's coming into the state. We need a balance. We need people that work and we need people that invest and create jobs.
And we want to be in a position, ultimately, if you look at a goal from the tax policy, we want to be a tax state that is not a high tax state for anybody.
That would be good.
Are we at an impasse on this?
I have not gotten my fourth vote, so I'm gonna declare us an impasse. I'm gonna give us a 15-minute break to go walk up and down and diffuse. And then we're gonna see if we have not been able to get a Veggie or FEPSA over here to talk about 312. That is the last bill I've got to try and get out. I'm not sure we're going to, but let's take the 10